Hello and welcome to another episode of Bullhorns and Sirens with me, Tommy.
Me, Sam.
And me, Poppy.
Well, today we have got a really special guest for you all, haven't we, Poppy?
We do indeed. We are welcoming today Olivia Louise Hamilton, the owner and founder of Changing Minds Training. Olivia has kindly given us our time to talk about mental health. She is very experienced on both sides of mental health, being a patient and a service provider. Due to her own personal experience, Olivia wanted to offer bespoke training services in mental health, where she combines her personal experience with professional qualifications to provide education and training around the subject matter, including a mental health first aid course, a suicide first aid course, and other tailor-made training. So, a very warm welcome to Olivia.
2 claps there, Olivia. Welcome.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
No, that's all right. No, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. So, we've sort of told your life story in that little introduction that Poppy said there, but are you happy to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about your previous work experiences and your hobbies, and then what got you into Changing Mind training and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out my, professional career in mental health services. So I was working for a community care company. Then went from there to an inpatient environment. I guess I can say that one because it's been knocked down now. Shrewsbury Court in Redhill. Used to work for those guys.
Oh God, that
been
one.
knocked down now.
Really.
Seriously, that one got closed down. They literally got shut down. And then worked at an ambulance service, didn't I, with you, Tommy?
Yeah, that's
about
where we
5
met.
years.
Yeah.
Over that period of time, I experienced really poor mental health. Something that I've struggled with for most of my life. Had a eating disorder diagnosis as a teen. Went on to recover from that, and then sort of late teens started struggling with mental health again. Went off to university. Wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and the irony was that I had to come back home because my mental health was so poor, and I dropped out of university.
Oh no! And then you ended up seeing a clinical psychologist.
I ended up seeing a clinical psychologist.
Typical.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus.
So yeah, early sort of 20s, late teens, was quite unwell with my mental health. Got a personality disorder diagnosis. Had a lot of issues with like self-harm, suicide, substance misuse. And that really was what led to me starting Changing Minds training. So back at the ambulance service, was scrolling through the internet on a night shift, came across something called mental health first aid. Didn't really know what I was going to do with it. Just decided to give it a go. So it was a little bit of a passion to begin with. Didn't really think it was going to turn into a full-time job, and here we are now. Do it on a full-time basis.
No, that's awesome.
That's in a nutshell.
And yeah, no, that's really cool. And we really appreciate you being open to talk about it as well, because I know it can be really difficult for a lot of people. But yeah, you're happy to be open and stuff like that, which we really appreciate. If you're happy, we're going to talk about your experiences in healthcare as a patient, and then we'll move on to more about Changing Minds training, if that works.
Yeah.
So when you came back from university to sort of fix your mental health or to try to get some help for it, how did you find getting specialist help? Was there like big delays? Because we sort of hear it all the time where people go, "Oh, I'm not getting the right help," or "Oh, they don't care about me," and stuff like that. What was your experiences of just reaching out and getting that sort of initial professional help?
Yeah, it took a long time. It's almost like you have to go through what feels like a bit of a tick box exercise at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think in hindsight it does make a little bit of sense to me now, because at the time I was having crisis after crisis, and I couldn't self-regulate, I couldn't keep myself safe. So there was actually no point me doing, really deep therapeutic work when that would potentially be really triggering for me. So yeah. I went through a lot of the stuff that most people do when they first have issues, your CBT, your counselling. I went through something called the Recovery College, where they do sort of short courses on managing emotions, sleep management, that sort of stuff. But I did need something a little bit more specialist. I waited 18 months for something called STEPS, which is specifically for borderline personality disorder. And then I waited another 2 years after that for psychotherapy. So yes, long waiting lists.
Yeah, massive waiting lists. And even I find, like, I've had friends and family that they sort of go to step one of getting professional help, and they say, right, yeah, we'll get a therapist to talk to you, and then they call them up over the phone, and they basically get them to pour out all of their emotions, and it pretty much causes a crisis, and they go, yeah, sweet, well, someone will get in contact with you within 6 weeks, and you're like, hang on a second, I was at an all right point at the moment. You've then just broken me down.
Yeah, I need someone now.
Yeah, and you've just broken me down, and now you're telling me that I'm going to have to wait, well, like you said, 2 years for anything real to actually happen. And then, yeah, I suppose we wonder why people have constant crisis after crisis after crisis, and it kind of makes sense.
It may not be the most delicate way to explain it to patients that I've seen, but I always find myself saying, I know that it feels like you're never getting anywhere with it when they're sort of reaching out to the ambulance and then trying to reach out to other mental health services. But I always say it's like throwing yourself at a brick wall until something breaks. And at the moment that happens, it seems to me, from the outside, that all of the mental health services is then available to you. It's just breaking in that's the hard bit. Because either you're not unwell enough, or you're too unwell, or you don't fit the right type of therapy, or the therapy that you want isn't available in your area, or it has to be private and all that type of thing. I always find that I don't know if that helps patients, but I don't know if it also gives them maybe hopefully a little bit of hope towards maybe this time, something will break.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I think we're as a society, I think we're quite reactive. There's a lot of work to be done, I think, in prevention, and in my experience, both sort of professionally and personally, I find that when you are at that point of crisis, suddenly there seems to be all of this help and support, but actually if we recognise things a little bit earlier down the line, maybe we wouldn't have all these people reaching crisis and phoning for emergency help. But unfortunately, that sort of primary care doesn't really exist.
Yeah, no, that sort of honed down on me, actually. Sort of to be proactive rather than reactive would be better, wouldn't it? But I think everything's like that, though, isn't it? Should we talk about I don't know, the roads and the potholes and stuff? No, I'm joking. But yeah, did you have experience with the ambulance service at all?
I did. Yes.
Yeah. How did you find that? Because I find you can walk into a crew room. In fact, you can even walk into a control room, and the call takers have very differing opinions on how they find taking a call from someone having a mental health crisis. You go to a crew room with ambulance staff, and they have differing opinions on it, and you can have someone who's happy to sit down for half an hour, have a really in-depth chat, or really want to help people get the most appropriate care for these people, and then you've got the other side where they just go, I just want to take them to A&E and just get them off my shoulders as quick as possible. How did you find your experiences with the ambulances?
I think I've experienced both of those and everything in between. It really is so mixed. I think most people, in terms of professionals, ambulance service or otherwise, I think people are doing the best that they can with the resources and the knowledge that they have. But there are a lot of negative experiences that I could share with you. I'm not necessarily going to today, because I think it's helpful to focus on the positive and learn from what people have done well.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is all the stigma surrounding it still, and people's attitudes and the, I guess, assumptions and misconceptions, particularly about certain diagnoses. But yeah, my experience, it's been a real mixed bag. There's been professionals that I can remember their names of because they've been so compassionate and had all the time in the world for me.
Yeah.
And there's others that I can also remember their name because it was like they went out their way to just be as horrific as possible.
Yeah.
What because some people, I think, clinicians, might not be aware of what the right and wrong things to say are, and they might sometimes say something that in their mind at the time they think, oh, that was probably a good thing to say, and then you're, as a patient, going, why have they asked me that, or why have they said that? That's an awful thing. Like, because I guess if we're on the outside looking in, we don't understand what you're going through, and we don't understand the best way to communicate it at times. Were there any sort of key things or common things that ambulance staff or other clinicians say to you, and you're like, why have you said that?
There's no sort of specific phrase or sentence that I can think of, but more sort of that attitude of you're wasting my time. You know, I've got physical health emergencies to be at. This sort of notion, you're doing this to yourself. Yeah, all of those sort of things I think I found to be quite unhelpful. Yeah, I can't really think of anything sort of specific.
Okay.
What would you, if you were in that situation and you've called an ambulance, what do you think is the best way for ambulances to deal with it? What do you sort of want? I know that's different for everybody, but from your experience, what did you want from the outcome? Did you want sort of a sit down and a chat and then maybe a go to hospital, or?
I mean, you know, it very much depends on the situation, but most of the time, it's just that being acknowledged, being validated, being listened to is, you know, is more powerful than anything. And I think particularly for people that have been almost recycled through the system, they probably know that calling an ambulance isn't going to be an answer to all of the issues that they've had. But I always think, and something that I bear in mind in my professional life now is, I think when people do reach out for help, they base that sort of interaction on future interactions they might have. So if they've maybe just reached out for help and that hasn't been received very well, they've had that attitude of, why am I here with the ambulance service, I can't really do a lot, that they then may act as like a barrier for future support they might have.
Right.
Does that make a little bit of sense?
Yeah, I'm just becoming self-aware of things that I say commonly, and I'm like, oh, actually, based on what you're saying, it's like that's probably, yeah, answer my own question in my head.
And also, it's like, I wish it was as simple as being like, you can say this, you can't say this, but it's not that black and white. Like, context is so important.
Yeah.
And thinking about like language, which is something I talk about a lot in training, people tend to want like hard and fast rules of what you can say and what you can't say, and it's just not that simple, because language is so nuanced. Who's saying it's important, context is important, and I think it's always about focusing on the person that you have in front of you, not making assumptions, using language that they find helpful. And you know, sometimes people do find certain things offensive that others won't, and I think just trying to look from the perspective of that individual and almost taking their word for it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually, because I've go to people before and you can literally look at your crewmate's face and you can just tell they're completely not interested, they're not believing what they're saying or even what they've been through. And I work in an area where there's a lot of asylum seekers that have come from sort of really difficult countries like Afghanistan and places like that. And there's just no compassion there. And, you know, yeah, a lot of them, they do come over and they really exaggerate a story to try and get asylum here. But, you know, you don't know which ones are telling the truth and which ones are just blagging it. So you kind of, you know, we're not making the choice on whether they can be here or not. We're just there for their crisis at that time. And it's the same thing, really. You know, I think that just taking for what they say verbatim and just really trying to put yourself in their shoes about the situation that they're currently in, maybe that might help be more compassionate towards things. But yeah, no, I think the whole stigma around everything is awful, and God knows what we need to do to change it. But it's considering that now a lot of staff members in the ambulance service have mental health problems themselves. I find it a bit weird, really, that there's still a stigma attached to it, even within the ambulance service, and the opinions amongst staff that have had a crisis themselves. And I think, hang on a second, you were in that person's position before. Surely you can understand a bit.
I think it probably chucks back to that whole culture thing, doesn't it? Is where there's a culture instilled from years and years and years ago within these services, whether it be the ambulance service, health, anywhere else in the healthcare service, or other organisations, and that culture drops down and cascades. And even if you go in with this, like, you're a newly qualified clinician of whatever grade, and you go in with this positive outlook, after X amount of days, weeks, months doing your job, you get dragged into the culture and the stigmas that come with it. And because you want to fit in, because you want to feel like part of the team, because you're new there and you feel like, oh gosh, I need to go along with these guys, and then you end up getting dragged into it rather than challenging it and being like, oh, actually, I don't really think that's a appropriate thing to say. People are too easily sort of, not everyone, but majority for sure, are probably too easily brought into those negative cultures.
I even admit to that to myself. When I started working, I worked with a few people who like sort of get a mental health job come up on the CAD, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, another mental health job. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. And then when I started, I sort of flipped into that mindset, being like, oh these I find them really like difficult to work through. And in actual fact, by changing just the way I start thinking about it when it pops up on the CAD, and immediately going, it's going to be fine, because we're just going to have a little chat and we're going to figure out what's going on, and then we're going to make a plan from there, and treating it like any other job, I end up having much better interactions with patients, I find, and much better like outcomes, I feel like, for them than what I was previously having when I first started, and I maybe wasn't so confident to be like, no, this is the way we're going to do it, and it's going to be fine, and everything's going to work out for us and for them.
Yeah, that's it. And I don't know if you found this, Olivia, as well, but like I've worked with people before that they walk in and they go, okay, well, what do you want me to do for you then? And it's like they might not even know themselves. You don't walk into a patient who's broken their leg and go, well, what do you want me to do for you then? Like you're shrugging your shoulders, like, well, this is, I don't know what to do, and so I think that's the difficult one as well. And you call someone for help, and then they come and they go, what do you want me to do for you then? It's just like, and I suppose looking at it from a physical illness point of view, if I had some like chest pain or something, and a paramedic walks in and goes,
what do you want me to do about that?
Yeah, I'll be like, are you joking me, mate?
Your
like,
job, mate.
And I suppose, and that would cause animosity between the patient and the crew.
Yeah,
and
so why wouldn't it cause animosity in the mental health scenario and the situation? Absolutely.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I think what I find with, like, I have no issue, I'll go to any job and every job, I don't really care. Like, we're there for the patients at the end of the day. I care about patients. I mean, I don't care. I don't care what job I go to. Like, because that's what we're paid for. It's what we do. It's what we're trained to do. I think what I find, I don't know if frustrating is the right word, but I'll go with frustrating about going to a mental health job, is that we're just limited in what we can do. Our resources, our I've spent hours and hours and hours on seeing, mental health jobs before, trying to come up with the best resolution for the patient, and you try and refer them to all the proper channels and all the proper, because realistically, going to A&E is definitely not the answer in the majority of the cases. People don't need to go and sit in 4+, and it's not 4 hours, let's be honest, however many hours it is in the waiting room of an A&E or in a cubicle or wherever it is they end up getting put for X amount of hours waiting for a review from the psych team, when that's just going to upset and destabilise how they are. And we try all these different referral pathways, but I find them very obstructive. Like, in trying to pass over referrals, you just don't get what you're hoping for. And then, you've then got to pass that back to the patient. And then you spend all this time going round and round in this circle. And then you end up being left with that same outcome of hospital. And you just feel useless. I think that's it. We're there to help people. And then suddenly you're, as the clinician, put into this situation of helplessness, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just cut you off there, Tony.
No, you didn't. That's right.
Just
it's about time.
Wanted to. Someone's got it. I just wanted to sort of speak to that point, really, because and also going back to what you said, Poppy, about the sort of individual mindset. I think that's important, focusing on what you can do as an individual, because some of these things that we're going to talk about, waiting lists, stigma, they're often due to big systemic issues. There isn't always an awful lot that we can do about that as individuals, but what we do have control over is how we present to those individual patients and what our attitude is like going into that job. And the point that I made earlier about, I think everyone in every job and every profession is always doing the best they can. I mean, most people don't wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to do a really crap job today, right? Most people are doing the best they can with the resources that they have. And all of that you said, Sam, about like frustration, waiting lists, referrals, I imagine there's some compassion fatigue in there, being overworked, sure, understaffed, all of that massively impacts how we respond to patients as well. But yeah, I really like what you said, Poppy, about that sort of mindset and going into that job with thinking about that individual.
Yeah, Sam gets physically fatigued as well with the lack of sleep. And...
Cheers, Tommy. Thanks, sir.
So, moving on from your experiences in the ambulance service, have you ever been sectioned before, voluntarily or even against your will? Because it would be good to talk about, even if you haven't, but people's experiences of that and what they think of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thankfully, I've never been sort of, had inpatient treatment in a voluntary or compulsory manner, but I have been under a 136 section. Not actually spoken about this before, so quite a little bit nerve-wracking, actually,
Oh, okay.
if I'm completely honest, but really happy to talk about it.
Oh, no, we appreciate that. Oh, that's good.
So, yeah, this was probably back about 2017 or so now, and I'd made quite a public traumatic attempt to end my life, and the ambulance service were called. At the time I was working for them, so I was absolutely mortified that any of this would get back to work.
Yeah.
Finally was seen by a police officer because I refused to see the poor ambulance service, and we agreed to get me down to the local hospital. I was dropped off there and I absconded, as you guys have probably experienced many times in your work. And it was shortly after then I was found again and I was sectioned because I was just so sort of determined to end my life. And I think that experience at the time was quite traumatic, quite disempowering, really humiliating actually at the hospital. Sort of the process of things that they take from you and sort of the room that you're put in, it's very dehumanising.
Yeah.
But equally, in hindsight, I think it needed to be done because I just didn't have anything else on my mind. And I think that I probably would have gone on and ended my life if something hadn't have happened. So it's a really tricky one, that one. It's a really fine line between, disempowering someone but also keeping them safe.
That's it, yeah. It's like when there's an intervention that needs to be done, and when it's to an extreme where you might end up killing yourself, I suppose those interventions have to almost equalise that. And so putting you in a room, or not you, but just everyone, in a room with nothing, almost sometimes needs to be done because there's always something that someone could use to hurt themselves. It's a difficult one, but I don't know, like, really, I mean, when I've been into like 136 weeks, and I'm sure all of our listeners, the patients that we've come across in the biggest crises always end up getting sectioned under a 136. But you go to the 136 week and it literally looks like a prison. And
feels like one too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right down to the big heavy doors. Do you know what I mean? It's proper.
And like
prison
and even down to like I've seen some of them have like the metal bars outside, the glass that like the glass that doesn't break. You can literally throw a rocket at it and it just won't break because they're just so bulletproof. And you think to yourself, that person is like, they need to be humanised or
how is this room any better for their mental health?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they go in there and I don't know, maybe half the time, in my experiences, they kick off, they start throwing things everywhere and people go, yeah, God, they're really bad. And you think, well, actually, this has just made the whole situation worse. And then when you mix it with, all you need is one person, like that one police officer or that one ambulance person, to just say the wrong thing or just give you the wrong attitude, because they're just not doing the right thing, they're not good at their job or whatever, and that's it. That's just completely screwed everything up. And you can build a rapport with patients really, really well. A police officer walks onto the truck and boom, it just gets completely taken away. That's nothing against police officers. But or anyone, or like even a relative.
For the officers listening, his registration number is.
But yeah, or even like a patient's relative or something like that. But yeah, and then I suppose even just like when that police officer turns around and goes, oh, we're gonna section you under this, and they give you their spiel. It almost feels like you're being arrested as well. Yeah. Does it feel like that?
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, have I done something wrong? And then, whenever a police officer says, "Oh, you don't worry, you haven't done anything wrong," you still can't fully feel like
It's almost
Yeah.
criminalising the act, isn't
Yeah.
it? And making you feel like
I also feel it's always a little bit disingenuous when you're interacting with the police and they say you haven't done anything wrong. I'm like, okay, cool, but why are you here?
Yeah, that's it. Do you think
Yeah.
it would be better or nicer or sort of more beneficial for ambulance staff to be able to section people?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. A lot in my training, I get asked, if there's a mental health emergency, who should I call? And for some reason, everybody seems to think that we're calling the police, and I'm like, well, no, it's a medical emergency.
Yeah, it's always referral from police or something like that. It seems to be
call pass through from police control.
Yeah, and even just in a lot of thing is we end up getting called for social issues. The ambulance always ends up getting called for social issues that we then hand back to the police, but the police get called for stuff that is definitely an ambulance issue. And especially mental health, is that everybody thinks that the police are the ones to deal with it, and no.
Don't really know where that's come from. I wonder if it's just sort of a bit archaic. You think suicide used to be illegal.
Yeah.
It hasn't been since 1961. I don't know. Maybe it sort of stems from there. Maybe historically, police did deal with mental health more. Yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if it's also because how, and especially the NHS, all you need is one thing to happen and then all of a sudden everything changes, right? And I don't know whether someone tried to catch someone when they were about to stab themselves, or or they got into a bit of a kerfuffle, an ambulance person got injured, and boom, we need the police to come to all of these mental health emergencies. And the Met Police,
I was going to say they're taking the opposite stance now, aren't they? Where
so-
they are not responding unless it's life or limb.
that's it, yeah. And initially it got quite a bad response, but to be honest, I think it works. It's better because you know that you don't have to worry about the police, and because a lot of the time the police turn up and it's not always their fault, but the patient's like, why is the police turning up? And we don't get told that the police is rocking up. They just turn up and they're like, oh, what? And then the patient's like, have you called the police on me? And then it sort of
smashes that rapport that you've built, doesn't it? And
exactly, yeah.
And also just the visual for people's neighbours and stuff like that. You've got an ambulance and then you've got maybe 2 police cars, and then they're like, oh, my whole street can see this. I don't want them to know what's going on.
There's a trust, I can't remember which one it is now, so I'm not going to name them because I can't remember. But there's a trust that runs a mental health car, and they posted on social media recently, on their social media channels, that they've just got their latest batch of mental health cars, and they're all unmarked vetoes. That because of that reason of they don't want to turn up outside the address of someone suffering a crisis, and then them to have to then worry about, oh my god, what are my neighbours going to think, what is such and such going to think, and
They
so
phrased
they've
it
taken
really
that
beautifully
away.
as well, and they said, I saw the same post and it was just phrased really nicely, and I can't for the life of me remember what it was now, but it's just like this sort of unobtrusive car that will turn up, and obviously you've still got people who are qualified to be there, but you don't look like there's anything drastic going on, and it sort of can hold a street to not knowing your personal issues.
It's more discreet, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I'm
absolutely,
looking for. Discreet.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I personally don't think there's ever a need for police on mental health calls unless there is, aggression or violence against another person. I used to despair at these calls that we'd have when I worked at the ambulance service, and there would be somebody who was self-harming, and we need to call the police because there's a weapon.
Yeah.
Well, of course there's a weapon. They're using it on themselves.
Yeah.
I just think that the police, they're not trained to deal with those kinds of situations, and I think it really just adds to the stigma that we're trying to move away from when it comes to mental health. It's not a criminal act,
That's it. And you can weaponise anything as well, can't you? I've got a fork in my bag to eat my lunch later. That could be something that that I could use as a weapon.
Can't carry around a concealed fork. That's
Yeah,
very dangerous.
Yeah, that's it. But then, like, you work with people and it goes, oh,
if he's got his lunch with the fork, it's okay.
Yeah.
But if it's a fork
If it's
on its
just
own,
a fork.
then we're going to have to talk.
It's that context again.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is a fork just on its own, but anyway. but yeah, it says, oh, patient is self-harming with a razor, and they go, oh yeah, we're going to need the police on this, and you're thinking, this is embarrassing, and you get there, and this poor bloke or girl is like having one of the worst days of their life, and you're like, oh, I think that you might hurt me, even though they're not. They're sitting in their bedroom, bawling their eyes out, bless them, and then you go, oh yeah, oh well, should we stand down the police then? 'Cause this is a bit embarrassing.
But then throw it the other way round, where they're not going to harm you. They've said, I've no intention of harming you, but they are sat there in front of you, actively harming themselves. And if you try and get close, they've still got that sharp that are you going to wrestle that off them? What are you going to do because you don't want them to harm themselves? Of course you don't.
No.
How are you going to? Is that our role? In terms of our safety, or actually, do we need someone like the police who can use the appropriate? You're just playing devil's advocate. Who can use the appropriate sort of restraint and.
I don't think it should ever be anyone's responsibility to stop someone self-harming. I don't think that should ever be the goal or condition of supporting somebody who self-harms. And I know that goes against a lot of our natural instincts, because we want to protect people, we want to keep them safe, right? But actually, it's a coping strategy, and I think that's what sometimes people fail to understand. And if we take someone's coping strategy away from them, they're potentially going to resort to something that's far more dangerous.
Right.
I don't think that we ever have a right to tell somebody to stop harming, or to tell them to stop, unless we've got something better to offer them. People self-harm because it works. I know people don't want to hear that, but it works on a level. It's meeting a need for them.
Right.
So we have to think about how can we meet that need through another way that might be safer or healthier. But that decision always has to come from the person themselves.
Are there other evidence-based, like tried and tested methods that do work to pull away from self-harm and?
So there's lots of sort of, I guess, suggestions, and again, the sort of core of this is that stopping should never be a goal or a condition, right?
Right.
There are things like harm minimisation techniques, delay techniques, alternate sort of coping strategies, minute strategies I found quite helpful. So just when I felt the urge to self-harm, I'd set a timer for 60 seconds, and I'd say, I'm not going to self-harm for 60 seconds, and I'm going to see how I feel. And the point of that isn't necessarily to not self-harm after those 60 seconds. It's not to do something really amazing and productive with my time, but it's about getting through those 60 seconds unscathed, right, so that I can then put in some coping strategies and hopefully be a little bit more regulated. And then once I started doing those 60 seconds, I built up a little bit of confidence in myself that I could manage, and that will get longer and longer and longer. But also different things work for different people, and I always really encourage people to just be curious and just go through trial and error. And if something doesn't work, don't be disheartened. Breathing exercises, for example. 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. Don't give me a breathing exercise. It's not going to work. I was going from crisis to crisis. Don't tell me to breathe. Now where I'm more stable, it's one of my core coping strategies. So, they change over time as well, and it's so unique to the individual. But yeah, I mean, I could talk about self-harm all day. I do courses on understanding self-harm. But I think trying to recognise that behaviour is a form of communication. What is that person trying to communicate to me? And usually underneath that behaviour is an unmet need. So what is it that they're getting from self-harming? And for some people that'll be communication, for some people it'll be connection, it might be self-punishment, it could be a whole sort of host of things. But once we sort of understand that, then we can look at how we can meet that need in another way. But yeah, not making any assumptions that the person wants to stop, because they might not want to. It might be working for them, and you can only change that behaviour when you're ready to do so. I feel like I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent there.
No.
Do you know what?
Perfect.
This
It's good to know. This is the education that we don't get, isn't it? I think it's and I think that's part of like breaking that whole stigma. It's just education, isn't it? And helping clinicians and everyone to understand better, because we're not unless you are a mental health specialist, you're just not educated on this at all. Like what you're telling me now, I'm like 13 years into the job, and I'm still like, did not know that. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's wild. Yeah.
Because I've always felt a little bit bad, and I'm glad that you've just said what you just said there, Olivia. Because when I go to patients who are like actively self-harming in front of us, I always sit back and I'll say, it's okay. Like, if you do what you need to do, and I'll just carry on chatting to you, and sometimes they draw a bit of blood. Blood doesn't like out or anything, but sometimes they can cause a.
We're gonna have to bleep that. We'll put a bullhorn over it. It's fine.
But sometimes they draw a bit of blood, and I just think to myself, okay, look, at the moment they're not critically unwell. They're not dying, like physically, right?
Sure.
So do I need to intervene? And I think to myself, it's so unsafe for me to tackle this person to the ground when they've got like a razor or a knife or something. And I think what they're doing to themselves right now is more safe than me trying to tackle them, because they could go deeper into their arm or deeper into their chest or into their neck or even my body parts, and then it will just create this catastrophe. And I can tell you now, every single time, after, sometimes a minute, sometimes 5 minutes of them sort of like yakking away at their arm or their leg or their tummy or something, they generally stop after a while with me just saying, it's okay, I'll be here, to catch you if you fall, kind of thing, if you do something really bad. But, and I'll just chat to them whilst they're doing it. And my crewmates that I work with are like, you are harsh, mate. And I'm like, but what else are we going to do? I don't really understand what.
I was going to ask you to get comeback from your crewmates for it.
Yeah. And it's not me being harsh. Like, obviously, it would be better for me and for them if they didn't, if they weren't hurting themselves at that time. But what are you going to do? Sometimes there's just nothing you can do, is there? And for me, I think that's one of those situations. I think it's just so interesting, and I hope the people listening, the next time they go to someone who's self-harmed or is actively self-harming, that they sort of change the way that they think and the way that they act around that, because that is new information to me. So yeah, that's and to Sam, who's 13 years into life. I mean,
into life.
Into life.
So, do you still experience like relapses or times where you're going, oh, this is a bad day? Because I spoke to a mental health nurse and I asked him, like, how do we fix someone with a mental health problem? And this job was really difficult, so my mind was already sort of tired about everything, and I was like, how do we fix this problem with this patient? And he went, you can't. He said, a mental health problem is something that you need to maintain, not fix. Whereas, a physical problem, you can. A broken leg, have an operation, is fixed and you can run on it again. A mental health problem is something that they're always going to have, and it's something that they need to maintain, not fix. And maintain and fix were like the two words that stuck with me. Was that the right thing to say to me? And also, yeah, do you still experience like up and down days and stuff like that, and how you cope with those?
Yes, there was a lot of questions there.
Yeah, sorry.
That's quite alright. So I suppose I can reflect on the feedback that you had from a mental health professional, and I want to just put a disclaimer out that I'm not a mental health professional.
Yeah.
And there are certain elements of that I do agree with. I think we can't fix people because we're not broken as human beings. We're products of our experience. So my diagnosis is really underpinned by a lot of childhood trauma that was then compounded by having to look after a family member with the same diagnosis, actually, about the age of sort of 17 onwards. So I agree with that element of it. I also agree with the management. I think mental health illnesses are a lot about management and acceptance. I use the word cured in a loose sense, but I also believe that some people can be cured or healed from mental illnesses. I think whenever we talk about recovery, like, recovery is so subjective. Like, what recovery is to one person won't necessarily mean recovery to another.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's even the same with physical health. You know, like, is somebody recovered from a condition if they're on medication, or are they managing that? Are they maintaining it?
Good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah. Do you have any health problems?
Yeah.
No. Oh, what do you take the Ramipril for? Oh, my high blood pressure. Right, so you suffer with hypertension then? No, that's why I'm on medication.
Yeah, I don't have
Right,
it anymore.
no, I don't have that anymore. It's that, isn't it? Yeah.
So I think sort of for me personally, it's about management. It's about accepting where you are, and I think overcoming the difficulties that you do have. I have a real love-hate relationship with diagnosis anyway, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we could go down.
Maybe for the next episode.
Yeah, maybe for the next episode.
I sort of see it described as sort of like peaks and troughs, and some peaks and troughs are deeper and bigger than others, but as long as you're maintaining like a vague plateau, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
Compared to somebody who's maybe in the middle of a trough.
Yeah.
But obviously with everyone it sort of varies as to how.
Yeah, I think again, you know, it's very individual. It's unique. I class myself as in recovery at the moment, and that's because I'm not having crises regularly. So the last time that I self-harmed was over 18 months ago. I haven't tried to end my life for about 4 years now. Whereas at a certain point in my life, they were things I was self-harming daily to cope. I was having a suicidal crisis probably on a monthly basis, and that's, you know, quite a way behind me. But do I have bad days? Yeah, everyone has bad days, and I'm not. I think I'm not naive enough to think I won't ever have a crisis again, but I'm also hopeful enough to think that I won't. If that does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah.
No, that's true, because I suppose it's almost what you need to then also get through the next day, right? It's like I do the same thing sometimes. I don't know. Actually, it's not the same. It's completely different. But like,
nice.
Made that first statement completely. I do the same thing. Well, I don't actually. It's,
I do the opposite.
Opposite, absolutely opposite.
no, I don't do the opposite. But like, it's kind of different. But like, you know, but we all do it. You know, like to get through the struggles that we're going through. Whether it's like money or whether it's just general tiredness, whether it's like pain or anything, you do get through it by sort of doing things like that, don't you? By saying it, oh, you know, I haven't had this for so long, so it's not going to happen to me. You know, like you talk to people like Richard Branson and stuff. Well, you might, but I do.
Any chance you get him to sponsor the podcast, Tommy? Yeah.
He said no. So.
But
yeah, so. Yeah, and even they say, like, you know, they tell themselves about their own successes and stuff every day, and then they sort of helps with their successes. So yeah, it's probably manifestation. Yeah. So another thing that the ambulance service has, and I think that it's something that's been going on for a while, but it's fairly small, is everyone calls it the mental health car, and it's a car that has a mental health practitioner. Sometimes it's like a nurse or actually, I don't really know.
I think it's mostly nurses. Yeah, I'd assume. Yeah.
And a paramedic on it. Some of them are mixed with a police officer as well. Do you think those are beneficial to patients? Sort of having a joint response unit type thing.
Yeah, I think to be honest, anyone that's had any additional training in mental health is going to be of benefit. I've never personally, you know, experienced any of those services. I don't think they were sort of in my area when I was having crises.
Yeah.
But you guys will know how little training you have around mental health, and I think it goes back to that point that we were talking about earlier. You know, when someone picks up the phone and they phone 999, they think that you arriving are going to be a professional who has had that training in mental health, and you're going to know how to help, and there just seems to be a real sort of gap there. So I think anybody that has that additional training or, you know, specialises in mental health is great, and also not just in the theory but also in practice. So
yeah.
you know, you might be able to tell me a little about what you've sort of learned in your degree, but I find that a lot of people are maybe trained in the theory, but when it comes to having a supportive, caring conversation, most people find it really difficult. They don't know what to say. They're worried about putting their foot in it, doing the wrong thing. And frankly, some people that I train in suicide first aid are probably better qualified than your average GP to then have a conversation about suicide. For some reason, we don't seem to be upskilling our professionals in these really important skills.
Yeah. No, it's so true though, because like you say, the mental health training that I got is the pathology behind things like bipolar and depression and basically all the different mental health disorders, and they teach you all about it, but they don't actually teach you how to talk to the person. And another thing that I find is that someone having a crisis with bipolar compared to a crisis with a personality disorder are two very different, and you really need to learn how to, or probably practice how to talk to those different caliber of people. And but we don't get that, do we?
I mean, our training in college before, because obviously I haven't done the whole parrot thing yet, as many people know, was half a day. Not even that. I think it was 2 hours from a guy who, to be honest with you, was actually very good and was very, just great at explaining what we need to do and all that. But it was 2 hours, and then a little on paper quiz, true or false quiz, and that was all we got. And they're like, off you go deal with these people who are in the middle of a crisis and you have no background in
It just
that.
blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. I mean, I don't know about now, obviously I'm about 4 years out of date from the ambulance service, but I would have said when I was there, a good 50% of the calls were mental health related.
So I would say, now, so the ambulance service now offers mental health first aid courses.
Mm-hmm.
You can apply for them, and they do sponsored CPD for it. So that's a thing. But I think training's getting better. So the university that I attended, I'll sing their praises on this one. One of our modules within our degree was a mental health module. So we had to complete an assignment on that and attend many lectures, and we had some actual simulation days with scenarios around mental health, both colleagues with mental health, patients with mental health, and and it was useful to an extent, but it's nowhere near real world scenario. It's nowhere. It's again that whole theory versus practice, sort of argument. But it's getting there slowly. I think our university was one of the first universities in the country to have a mental health module, and that was probably down to the lead of the course of the whole paramedic program there at that university, who's very pro mental health as a paramedic herself, and is leading the way where she can to better our training as in the mental health field. So I think it's slow and sure. We had a 2-week mental health placement as well, which I found really insightful. I thought that was amazing.
Oh, I've heard good things about that as well from people from your course.
Yeah, honestly, it was really good. So we spent 2 weeks in the mental health unit with varying different teams, from the assistant psychologists through to the occupational therapists, the activities coordinators, all the different sort of members of the team, and it was really insightful, because what it did for me as a pre-hospital clinician was it showed me the reason and for that delay, for the reasons to why, because we're very much why isn't this being done now? That's the attitude that we have as pre-hospital clinicians, because we're used to, like we said, fixing the problem now. You can have a patient with an MI, you take them to the cath lab, the problem's fixed. Whereas with mental health, it's that longer sort of journey and that longer sort of struggle. And you see it a little bit more realistically when you go and do these placements, because you sit in the MDT meetings and you see them discuss patient by patient, case by case. And you're like, okay, fine, I understand this a little bit more now as to why it takes so long and why there is such a backlog of beds and why you can't get everyone that wants to be admitted, because it's just that lengthy process.
And people would probably be quite surprised to realise how little therapeutic work is done within a hospital setting. So early 2000s was when we closed sort of the old asylums and introduced community care, and the recovery rates went through the roof for mental health, and that's because people don't do the vast majority of their recovering in hospital. There's very little going on in terms of therapy. It's about getting them stable and back out to the community. So
Did you know that Bullhorns and Sirens podcast is affiliate members of CPD Me, the most dynamic
online personal CPD portfolio going. And we have secured a discount code for all of you listeners. If you just head to our website, www.pocketclinician.co.uk, and you can see on our homepage there'll be a link going to CPD Me. Follow that link and type in the discount code Bullhorns CPD and you'll get 50% off your first year's subscription. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
What advice would you offer to any person suffering from or struggling to cope with their own mental health right now? Whether that be someone at the beginning of a battle or someone that's quite far into it, what or who should be their first point of call?
Advice-wise, I don't like to give advice because, what could be really well-intentioned advice for somebody who is mentally well could be super counterproductive for somebody who's mentally unwell. And also, I think it sort of falls into that realm of I know better than you know yourself. And again, not a mental health professional, but I'm going to go with something that probably sounds really cliche, and it's just not to give up. Like, there are so many times looking back where I wanted to throw in the towel, and I just did not see any light at the end of the tunnel, and I was making tiny progress, but progress, no matter how small, is progress. And I hope with people that are now sharing more stories about experiencing severe mental health conditions and going on to still achieve great things, I hope that does give people hope. But just if you can hang on to that hope, it really does get better. It really does get better. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you'll get there.
Is time a healer?
I think time's a healer in the sense that you learn what helps, what doesn't help. You learn new coping strategies. I think when we're kids, we learn a little bit about the human body. We learn how to take care of ourselves physically, but typically we don't learn about our minds. We don't learn about our emotions. We don't learn how to self-regulate. Yet we're all expected, sort of as adult human beings, to know how to do these things. So I think time heals in that sense, in that it gives us the opportunity to grow and learn new things.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you said that, because my daughter, she's 2, she goes to a nursery, and when we went to their open day, it's basically like a little sales pitch to try and get you to go to their nursery. They talk about them trying to teach the kids how to regulate their emotions, because it's something that kids just can't do, and probably most adults as well, actually. And it's really good, and the tools and the things that they do to help a kid who's just screaming, because like when you see a kid in the aisle of Asda's screaming the house down, it could be something as simple as the mum didn't let them have an ice cream, but they don't know how to regulate their emotions, so they just let it all out and just scream to the top of their lungs. So the nursery teaches the kids how to regulate their emotions, and also they do things like hugging and breathing exercises. I mean, this is with a 2-year-old, and I've even seen it. She'll get annoyed because she's already had a yogurt today, and I'll say, no, you're not having another yogurt, and she'll go, and she'll try to hit me. And then we'll do come on. yeah. And then I'll go, no, come on, we don't hit because it hurts. And then we do breathing together, and it just calms her down really quick. And I think it's a learned behaviour from the nursery, not the hitting.
Do you know what would have calmed her down quicker, Tommy?
Yeah.
Another yogurt.
Yeah. But yeah. And
we see Sam's style of parenting.
Not at all. That's
Reward the behaviour.
Reward the behaviour.
But I just think it's quite good that nurseries maybe are starting to do it now.
Love
or
it, yeah.
It might just be the only one, I don't know. Obviously she goes to the best nursery.
Are we sponsored by your nursery?
Yeah, I feel we should be at this point. Born and Sirens is brought to you by...
Yeah, the nursery.
Spot on. No, I think it is something that is slowly being introduced. I don't do quite as much work with schools as I used to, but it is something I'm seeing and hearing about more in terms of being introduced to the syllabus and even your PSHE lessons, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But talking for you and I doubt any of us sitting here remember learning anything about our emotions or our mind. Or
No, definitely
No, I was
not.
thinking
I mean,
that.
you just brought me back though, by saying PHSE. God, I forgot that existed.
Throwback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that putting condoms on bananas and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember those.
That's about as good as it got.
Yeah.
Ah, see, I went to a Catholic school. I didn't learn that, which is why I've got 18 children. But yeah, but no, it's mad. Like another thing that I suppose we struggle with as a society, because it's a new thing as well, and it affects young people, is social media, and it affects us in so many different ways. But how do you feel like social media affects specifically the mental health of not just younger people but everyone?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so divided on this. I see both sides of the coins. I think of the coins, all the coins,
All of the coins.
I think it can be very negative. I think we all know not many people are there posting their lowlights. You get all the highlights and the great things, and it can elude you into thinking that everybody else's life is fantastic when you're maybe sat at home on your own on a Friday night. And we know social media is not the reality, but I think particularly when you're a young person, actually scrap that. Even now, even myself, I can look at social media sometimes and think, oh, my life is really rubbish in comparison, you know. But then equally, I think it does provide a lot in the way of connection and also the sharing of experiences. Again, I'm going to caveat that with it. That's not always helpful because you get the sort of TikTokification of mental illness. But I've also experienced and seen how powerful it is hearing about other people's experiences and particularly some of those maybe, you know, more severe diagnoses that the outlook is quite poor for. Hearing people talk about having those diagnoses and not being restricted by them and still going on to do great things. So yeah,
I suppose you can look at it two ways, because like you say, because you can look at someone who's had a really difficult battle with their mental health, and now they're doing really well at the moment. They're, I don't know, on holiday or doing something that they just couldn't do before. And you can look at it two ways. You can go, oh, that's really good that they've done that. Maybe I could get out of my battle and do that. Or you can look at it and go, oh, well, look at them. You know, I can't do that. I can't see myself doing that. And then I suppose, you can look at it two ways, can't you? I follow a few people that talk about how to eat well and how to exercise well, how to...
Doesn't listen to them, just follows them.
Just follows them, just looks good, doesn't it? But and I suppose, would you say that that's healthy social media? I don't know. I mean, we've just...
Well, I mean, they're talking about healthy eating and healthy lifestyles, so that's healthy.
As opposed to them just
But
flaunting
I mean, that
what
could
they've
equally
got.
lead to unhealthiness, you know, in terms of obsession over body image and, you know, diet, exercise and things like that. Because it's about having an equal balance, isn't it, I think?
I found I've done a little social media cleanse, and I have focused what is going to appear on my Instagram feed, either from who I'm following or sort of the stuff that can pop up, on stuff that I enjoy. So at the moment, it's more geared towards like generally being a bit more thoughtful about like how I go through the world, and sort of a lot of like nature stuff and travel stuff that I'm just interested in, and history, in order to find that when I go on social media, as well as like seeing my friends and what they're up to, I get this sort of influx of good stuff that I find more inspiring, rather than sort of I literally did the other day unfollowed all the Kardashians. I hope.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
Don't unfollow us.
Don't unfollow us. But like I unfollowed that type of person that was repeatedly coming up on my like For You page and all that type of thing.
It's hard, isn't it? Because the algorithm pushes stuff your way.
Pushes it.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think, like, coming back on what Olivia said, it's that, like, social media is sort of... I don't want to say that it encourages mental health, but it's like people put up these 5 things mean you've got ADHD. If you have these 6 traits, you've got this illness and this, and then people latch onto that, don't they, and go, oh my gosh, but that TikTok video, so maybe I do, I'll look into that more. And I think there was a Panorama episode that I watched a while back where they investigated into this, how people like were going based on these like trends that they saw on social media, and then they would approach private companies to get a diagnosis because of the waiting list in the NHS, and these private companies were diagnosing them without consult of a doctor, or, you know, a proper lengthy time that it takes to diagnose these sort of illnesses, prescribing them quite heavy medications, which they would then have to stick to. And, that all stems from that initial social media start off point. Not saying social media is bad. I use social media. We're on social media, all of us, both as a platform and as individually. But, it's finding that healthy balance. And I quite like that, cleansing your feed.
Cleanse.
Yeah, to see what you want to see and to know what's healthy for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So guys, it's come to that point in the episode where we have our new little segment. It's not so new. Is it new? I don't know. Is it free? We're free in now, I think, aren't we? So we'll still go new. Quick fire questions. We've still not come up with a name for this. I think we initially had 60 seconds with Sam, but that was laughed off by one of our previous guests. So perhaps we should go for some time with Tommy, or Poppy pops her questions. I don't know what our thoughts are.
I thought he was going to say something else.
They're not great, are they?
Time with Tommy just sounds creepy. Poppy pops the question.
No, Poppy pops her questions.
Pops her question. Okay.
I think Time with Tommy sounds so sinister now. Now we're saying it more and more.
The more you say all of them, the weirder they sound.
It's why I've not repeated 60 seconds of Sam. I'm trying to keep that one. Let's phase that one out. Let's.
I'm trying to say that to every patient now. Okay, come on, let's have some time with Tommy.
Come to hospital. You'll have plenty of time with Tommy.
Time with Tommy in the queue.
Okay, I'm going to put it out there. To anyone that's listening, all two of our viewers, if you have a better suggestion for what we can call this segment, please send it in to us, drop us a message, and maybe your suggestion will be what we call this segment.
Maybe you'll be the reason why we're successful, not us.
What was wrong with
Maybe.
quickfire questions?
Oh, it was never called quickfire questions.
That's
That's probably what. Yeah, I wrote that on the script just because I was like, well,
Call it quickfire questions.
okay, yeah, sure. I mean, I just. Yeah, I put so much time into Time with Tommy. I didn't. all of 10. It was so easy. Time with.
What was the last book you read?
I have a habit of starting books and leaving them about a quarter of the way through. But the last book I read and finished is called The Myth of Normal, and it's by Gabor Mate.
Oh.
Very interesting read. Thick old book, but really interesting. All about sort of trauma and all that fun stuff.
What are you optimistic about in mental health right now?
I think just the general increased awareness of it, just among the general population. I think it's helping combat some of that stigma and just moving towards it being on par with physical health.
What are you most fearful of?
I feel like I should say something like spider or heights, but honestly, I am really scared of making mistakes. I'm trying not to be, because that's how we learn. But if I'm being honest, mistakes.
If you could have dinner with two people, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
They'd be alive, because dead would be a bit boring. And I'd go with...
They don't say much.
Fair.
Jim Carrey and Russell Brand.
Yeah,
Oh.
good choice.
Jim
Thank you.
Carrey.
Fair enough. Why?
I just feel like they've experienced life. They've really experienced life.
Yeah.
They've been through some... They have some good stories to tell. I think they have a great perspective. I feel like they're both quite philosophical, but also humorous.
What person has had the biggest influence on your life to date?
I had to think about this quite a while.
She's still thinking.
Still thinking.
Do you know what?
In episode 11,
Because as I say it, I'm like, if she hears this, she's really gonna cringe. But genuinely, and Tommy, you've heard this story before, and I'm gonna do a name drop. I had a manager at CCAM called Penny Green, who was just an absolute life changer. The sort of reasonable adjustment she put in place for me when I was at a stage where I was about to lose my job has just been a massive catalyst for my recovery.
oh,
That's very sweet.
yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Penny. Yeah, she was really nice. I liked her.
What is one thing you would want more people to know?
That a diagnosis is a description of where you are, not who you are.
That's powerful.
That's, yeah.
You're welcome.
That's more powerful than when Fiona Moore said respect. So yeah, no, thanks for participating in the quick fire questions, or long fire questions as they were. I hope everyone knows a little bit more. And yeah, I think that when you said a diagnosis isn't a description of who you are, it's where you are, isn't it? Which is pretty powerful. So let's talk a bit about changing minds training and your role as a. Oh, you said you weren't a professional, but I suppose you probably are. Not a mental health professional, but what, a professional in what?
Yeah, I class myself as a trainer. I mean,
A trainer.
I am going down the route of therapeutic stuff. I'm currently training as a hypnotherapist, so I'll sort of add
cool.
that to my bow soon. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I've had hypnotherapy before. It's very good. We can talk about that later.
Excellent.
Anyway, your website bio, it says that you volunteer with a company called Shout, the crisis text line service. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because I've never heard about that, and how people can access it and the benefits of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, so firstly, my website is a little bit out of date and I no longer volunteer for Shout. However, I was a crisis volunteer for just over a year. Shout is very similar to Samaritans, except it's a crisis text line service. So I find it tends to be quite helpful for young people who are usually attached to their phones. But also, it's sometimes easier for us to write things down rather than having to, pick up a phone and call someone. So, text Shout to 85258 and there'd be a trained volunteer at the end of that ready to support you with
Oh, sweet.
Oh wow.
whatever you need help with.
Is that those people just sat at home, whatever they do? Like, are they there all the time, or do they like sign on and then sign off? And
It's a 24/7 service.
Right.
Obviously, it's not the same person on 24/7. So people will, sign on and off. But yeah, it's like the Samaritans in that it's 24/7. It's free. It's confidential.
wow.
Good one to use.
So let's talk about what you do now. So you run a company called Changing Minds Training. Can you tell us a bit about what that is and how and why it was founded?
Yeah, of course. So we're a workplace wellbeing training provider, and I really set that up off of the back of my own personal experience more than anything else. Shout out again to Penny. That was such a catalyst to my recovery, that conversation that I had. And I basically just wanted to train more people to be like Penny because
cool.
it had such a profound impact on me. And we have a mission that's quite simple, and it's making mental health an everyday conversation. So my idea is a world where we can say that we're feeling a bit stressed or a bit low in the same way we might if we had a headache or a cold.
So is it like what you would prefer to have as a person in terms of like what the training that you're offering people? Is it like you want to train everyone to be able to speak to the way that you'd like to be spoken to and dealt with in that moment?
Yeah, so I'm just really equipping people with the skills and the confidence to have those supportive conversations, to ask difficult questions, to, if they notice signs that somebody's struggling, to be proactive with that, to make that approach, and just to keep it quite informal in the same way that we do with our physical health if we might notice something's wrong with someone.
Yeah, no, to be fair, I mean, I think that I've definitely been that person that goes, I think they're going through a rough time, and I've turned a blind eye to it. I don't really know why, but yeah, maybe it was just the awkwardness of approaching that person and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I suppose that would help everyone really, even me, to be fair. I might sign up to one of your courses, Olivia.
We can do it as a company day,
Company
Tommy.
day.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Pocket Clinician meets Changing Minds Training. So, what training have you undertaken so far?
So I've done all of my sort of accredited mental health training with an organisation called Mental Health First Aid England. They're sort of the gold standard when it comes to mental health first aid. There's lots of other companies popping up doing their own thing, but like everything, it comes to different levels of sort of quality. So I do a range of their products, both adult and youth versions. So the full first aid course is a 2-day course. They do like a shorter 1 day for workplaces and a half-day awareness. There's also some training that's specific to managers. And then I've got the suicide first aid training, which is a City and Guilds accredited course. Recently done a little bit of work around neurodiversity, and obviously my hypnotherapy training as well. But I'm yet to be signed off and qualified just yet.
Yeah. And so with that, when you say about hypnotherapy, because you're training people to be mental health first aiders, right?
That's right, yeah.
So with the hypnotherapy, would you be like a hypnotherapist, or would you be training people to do hypnotherapy?
No, that's right. I'd be a hypnotherapist first.
Yeah.
Practice it a little bit myself before I teach anyone how to do it, I think.
That's true.
Is the end goal to teach other people how to do it, do you think? Or
No, I don't think so. Hypnotherapy was sort of something that fell into my lap. It came about as an opportunity and I didn't want to turn it down. Not really sure what my long-term plans are with it yet, but I'm very happy with the training that I'm doing at the moment.
It's just like adding, like you said, more strings to your bow. You can't.
Yeah.
It can't be a bad thing to
Yeah.
add more stuff
Yeah,
to what you know.
Absolutely.
so you mentioned you provide mental health first aid and suicide first aid.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of suicide first aid before. Do you mind sort of what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, sure. So mental health first aid is very similar to your physical first aid. So anyone's done their physical first aid, you'll have your ABC mnemonic, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have an equivalent in mental health first aid that's like an action plan that guides you through the steps that you take when you're supporting somebody. And mental health first aid I'd say it's more general to mental health. So we'll look at different diagnoses, we'll look at different crises and how to respond to those. We look at a lot of the sort of inequalities and stigma and really building up people's skills and confidence in having those conversations. Suicide first aid is entirely focused around suicide, a lot more sort of in depth. We look at how we form an intervention, how we create a safety plan, and again building up people's skills and confidence in asking directly if somebody is thinking about suicide.
Right.
Yeah, because I often struggle with that sometimes, or not so much now actually, but I did especially when I first started out on the road. It was a very weird question to ask someone, like, do you want to kill yourself? And then, rightly or wrongly, I've just asked it like that. Like, you know, if they're not being specific with what their plan is or something like that, I'll go through the questions like, are you thinking about self-harm? Are you thinking about this? Are you thinking about... And then, I'll just say, are you thinking about killing yourself? Or do you have thoughts of killing yourself and stuff like that? And I don't know whether it's just because it's quite a bold question that people feel a bit uncomfortable with it. Is that, I don't know if that's the right way to ask it. Is that what you would train people to say?
Yeah. So one of the biggest misconceptions around suicide is this idea that using the word suicide or asking somebody directly if they don't already have thoughts can give them an idea they don't already have, and there's just no evidence clinically or anecdotally to suggest that's the case. And all of the evidence that we have about direct questioning supports that being the first step to getting somebody some help. It opens up that conversation. And I guess to give you a little sort of few nuggets of information as to why, when we're asking somebody that direct question, we're giving them permission to talk about something that is very taboo, that we're conditioned not to talk about. Mm-hmm. If you think about, Tommy, how hard it is for you to ask that question and how uncomfortable it is, imagine if you're the person that's thinking about suicide and you've got to summon up the strength to say, I'm thinking about suicide.
That's so true. Yeah,
it makes it an easy yes or no question.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I always say to people within training is don't be afraid to ask that question, because even if you ask someone and they say, no, I'm not thinking about that, if they do start thinking about suicide in the future, who do you think they're going to remember?
Exactly, yeah.
Right? And actually over 20% of the population have thoughts of suicide. It's not uncommon. You're actually more likely to come across someone that's having thoughts of suicide than someone that's having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I think, going back to our discussion earlier about the lack of sort of training around mental health in the ambulance service, I think that shines a really bright light on the gaps that we're missing.
So Olivia runs a company called Changing Minds Training, and she offers courses on mental health first aid and suicide first aid. For our listeners only, which is you, she is offering 50% off for the individual courses on mental health first aid and suicide first aid until the end of the year. So head to her website, it's www.changingmindstraining.com. Have a look at what course works for you and use discount code BULLHORNS 50, and you can claim your 50% off your course. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
So, Olivia, with all the training you've undergone regarding mental health, how would you say this has helped you in understanding your own diagnosis and helping others with theirs?
So I think it's really helped me understand mental health to a deeper extent. I wouldn't say so much my diagnosis, because personality disorders are still very controversial. They're quite complex, and it's not something that we delve into in mental health first aid. But it has really helped me, I think, just understanding that we all go through these struggles, diagnosed or not, people talk about them or not, everybody has these difficulties in some way, shape or form. And I think it's just helped me feel, I say normal in the loosest of senses, but just made me realise that I'm just like anybody else that's gone through a bit of a difficult time, and I've needed a bit of help.
Yeah, that's it. Because what I found is that I had a time a couple of years ago where I felt really down, and I've never felt like that before, and I was like, God, I just didn't want to do anything. I'd just sit on the sofa all day, do nothing, just flick through my phone. I just felt like I just didn't care about anything. I didn't really eat much, wasn't really drinking, and then luckily I don't know, I've had a lot of support from friends and family and stuff. But yeah, so I managed to sort of get out of it. But I was like, actually, that's kind of similar to how someone with or without a diagnosis would sort of deal with things with their own mental health. So actually, and then it put things into perspective, because I was like, oh, so everyone has mental health.
Yeah.
Same as physical health. And it put things into perspective, because I always looked at myself as someone who is all right. I don't have any mental health problems. And I always used to, until then, because I was like, actually, everyone does. You can wake up in the morning and go, oh, I don't really feel like working today, or something like that. Just because you don't want to jump off a bridge, it doesn't mean that you don't have a mental health problem. Or not mental health, but yeah, do you know what I mean?
Well, it's like physical health, isn't it? Like you said, we all have a baseline of physical health. We all have a baseline of mental health.
Yeah.
And whether you fluctuate in high extreme peaks and troughs, or whether you just fluctuate with little blips along the way, I think everyone does, and there's some that admit it to themselves, there are some that are aware of it, and there's others that just don't see it at all. They're just like, oh, well, I just thought I was just
a bit down.
Just a bit down, didn't want to go to work today.
Yeah.
Like, that's it,
I think we all have mental health problems. We don't all necessarily have an illness or a disorder.
Yeah.
And the other point, just to pull out of that, is that term mental health. I think there's so much negativity associated with the term mental health. We say it and we think of illness or despair, but actually, like you say, it's the same as physical health. It's a neutral term. It can be good, it can be bad, it can be anything in between, and we all have it, regardless of where it sits on that spectrum.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So going back to your company, you said that you're quite happy with things about where you are and stuff like that, but is there any ideas in there that you're thinking, yeah, this is my end goal, or what your next step is? I know you've got the hypnotherapy and things, but where do you see the growth of your company?
Great question. So if you'd have asked me this about a year ago, I would have said I wanted to be like the Coca-Cola of mental health training.
Yeah.
But I've realised how many politics are involved in those big companies. So right now, this year, I'm taking a bit of time away from the business. I'm focusing on a lot of sort of personal stuff, and getting myself into a place where I'm ready to take on a team. So my idea would be probably a team of maybe about 10 of us, and to be partnered with sort of top tier clients. And by that I mean the ones that they actually are having me come in because they care about well-being, not because they just want to tick a box. And then the other element to the business, which I'm really set on having, is a sort of charitable arm. So when I first started out, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to help everyone, and I quickly realised you can't run a business that way, Liv. What I was really passionate about was sort of that early intervention and prevention. So I think schools, young people, children, really important that they're sort of educated and supported. But also, you guys in the emergency services for all of the reasons that we've already discussed. So eventually I would like to have my corporate clients sort of overpay as part of their corporate responsibility, and then that will then go into sort of concession work or freebie work for the guys that really need it. And
that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
that is good. So would you literally like to go to universities or even ambulance services who are running their in-house training courses and teach ambulance staff mental health first aid and suicide first aid?
I'd love to. I will teach anybody that will listen to me, Tommy.
Oh, fair enough. I'll come round to
Tommy's out then, isn't he? He won't listen to anything. So.
No, seriously though, I think probably because again, my background, having worked in the ambulance service and my personal experience, there is a special place in my heart, I think, for emergency services.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, your family works in the emergency services as well, so
no.
it's
Stays
I think
in
it's
the family.
It stays in the family. That's it. There's always a a connection or a bit of Velcro to connect.
I like what you said about trying to be like the Coca-Cola of mental health.
I'm doing a lot more sort of shorter awareness trainings these days. So we've got like a series of masterclasses on topics that are kind of related to mental health. It might be awareness for everyone, or for managers, or do a lot of things like stress management, burnout prevention, all of those sort of like little micro topics that feed into that bigger picture. And obviously we do bespoke training as well. Sometimes the off-the-shelf stuff isn't right for a particular client. They might want something that's more specific to their organisation or sector. So yeah, do a little bit of bespoke work as well.
Oh, cool. No, awesome. So moving away from Changing Minds training, and I think that this question is going to really be aimed at everyone as clinicians and as people, because we really don't know what tomorrow brings with our mental health and things. So the services that are available to people in a crisis, me personally, I'm only really aware of Samaritans, and now you know about Shout, the text line. Is there any others that are available, and how do we access those?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is Hub of Hope, if you haven't come across it, is a really good central resource for not only crisis supports but other related mental health sort of support. So there's all kinds of things on there, from financial difficulties to depression to crisis. So that's a good sort of central resource. There are lots of other helplines that exist that might be for specific sort of groups of people. So you've got Papyrus, which is for under 35s. They've got a helpline. You've got Calm, which is for men. Obviously Samaritans and Shout we've discussed. I don't think this is something that's available nationwide, but I know certainly down in Surrey we have safe havens, and they're used to good effect. And then the final one would just be I think what people tend to call crisis lines, but they're actually called urgent mental health helplines, and there'll be a particular one for the area that you find yourself in. But again, these are things that are available 24/7. They'll direct you to they'll do an initial triage and then direct you to the most appropriate support, and that can just be found on a quick Google, urgent mental health helplines.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. There's so many services out there, and then it just makes you wonder why we don't just have everything on a plate for us to be able to tell people.
And why they're so under promoted. Why are they not on leaflets and social media adverts and whatever everywhere?
Yeah.
Is there any companies or people or places or things that you can think of that are decent for like self-referral?
There's one that I've been following recently, and I think it's called Self Space. I might have to check that out, but very, very similar concept to BetterHelp. I mean, I'm always a bit reluctant to mention sort of private therapy pathways, because I know it's not a luxury that everybody has, but there is that option for people that can afford it. So that the BACP is a really good place to start. That's got your counsellors and your psychotherapists on it. I can't think of anything else outside of that.
I do realise with BetterHelp that is, when I speak to patients about it, I'm like, it's not particularly cheap, and I understand if it's not accessible to you, but if you don't know about it, this is the thing that I can offer you that if you can privately fund it, like I think I funded it for myself for 2-3 months, and then I felt like I'd got what I needed out of the counselling that I had, and then I sort of let the subscription go. But it was really nice to sort of have that.
The only other thing that I'd add to that is, if we're talking about employees, have a look at what internal support is available to you, because most organisations nowadays have an EAP, an Employee Assistance Programme, and I know there's often a lot of reservations about using these because of the link to the employer, but they are confidential. They can't take any of that information back to your employer, and we tend to find that lots of these things are accessed via those private referral pathways. So you maybe have 6 sessions for free, or the wait list won't be quite so long. There might also be other services that they can access through that
And
internal support.
Even like school and unis as well, they will tend to offer it as well, and they may have to refer you on eventually, but at least for the meantime you can access what is there and available.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
No, that's awesome. So, unfortunately, we've come to our last question. We've got a couple of questions from our listeners, but the one from us really is, if there was one thing that you could change about anything to do with mental health, whether it be the services, the patients, funding, anything, what would it be?
Just that we learn about it growing up. I think if we learnt about it in the same way we do, crossing the road when we're kids, I feel like that would have a massive impact on all of us later down the line.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. I think it would as well. I don't think anyone can really disagree with that. I think it would be much beneficial to me if I learnt how to, even like, when you're, especially for blokes, when we're teenagers, like anger management and things like that, if you just understood it a bit more, why do I feel like this, why do I want to punch a wall and things, then you'd be able to manage it. But then that is almost practicing how you manage your emotions later on in life with things like money issues, or you didn't get the job you wanted, or when your nan or your mum dies and stuff like that. It's all things that we don't really know how to deal with, and if we haven't practiced anything like it before, how are you meant to deal with it when something big happens?
Yeah, spot on. And it's really our emotions that are the issue. It's normally our response to the emotions that are problematic, and that's the part that we're not taught. No, that's so true.
Okay, so shall we move on to our questions from our listeners? The first one that I have here is, I suffer with emotionally unstable personality disorder, but I would love to be a paramedic. Is this still possible for me?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. This goes back to that little quote that you liked earlier. Your diagnosis doesn't define you. That's the diagnosis that I have, and it hasn't stopped me from doing the things that I want to do. I would say find some stability first, get some good coping strategies, get a good support network, maybe before you go down that route, because it is taxing, as you guys can all vouch for. But absolutely, just because you have any diagnosis doesn't mean that you can't do anything that you want to do.
Yeah, 100%. Do you think, like, saying that, actually it might not, but because I know they say you shouldn't compare your own experiences with other people in any situation, but would it help having experiences like that, and then going out to patients in a crisis or something? I suppose it probably allows you to empathise more with patients, so there probably are benefits to becoming a paramedic after you've become stable with your personality disorder.
Yeah.
There are probably some benefits to being a paramedic for patients, if that makes sense. I know people will drain on the negatives, going, are you going to be able to deal with the tough work-life balance, when actually it's not that bad. But yeah, so yeah, 100%. I agree.
Guys, thank you very much. I think that pretty much brings us to a close for this episode. Olivia, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate having you on. Would you like to just tell everyone how they can find you and reach you, what your socials and your websites are?
Yeah, we're changingmindstraining.com and just Changing Minds Training on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And just a big thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, they're absolutely our pleasure.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate it. And I've definitely had my mind opened a bit and my eyes opened, and I imagine that everyone listening will. It's funny, we had a few more questions, but we sort of answered them, didn't we? The questions
asked
from
and
the
answered,
listeners.
I think is what we were saying.
Yeah, we sort of had already answered the questions from the other listeners. So yeah, sorry if you didn't get your specific question answered, but we've pretty much covered it in this episode.
What we will do is we will link in our episode bio the mental health services that we talked about. We'll grab those off of Olivia and we'll link them there for you in case you wanted to have a browse, whether it be for your patients or whether you are yourself a patient looking to somewhere where you can reach out to. As always, you can find us over on our socials. On TikTok, we are at Bullhorns and Sirens, and the same for our Instagram and our Twitter, or X as it's now called.
But if you didn't know already, we do partner this podcast with Pocket Clinician. We sell the 2 best pocketbooks currently on the internet. One is on history taking, documentation and patient assessment, so it's perfect for a student paramedic or the junior clinicians that are working their way up to paramedic in the in-house. And we've got a second book on ECGs called Beating the Basics, which personally I think is good for everyone. We wrote it, and even we keep copies on us to remind ourselves every day, because you never know when that complicated ECG is going to get pumped out of the life pack. You can buy them as a bundle and saves yourself some money, but head over to www.pocketclinician.co.uk and get yourself one today.
Thank you guys so much. Coming soon on a few episodes' time, we have a physician associate to discuss all things frailty and a couple of junior doctors and much, much more. Thanks for staying tuned and catch you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.